it's Jen. Welcome to Windrose Fiber Studio, where today we'll be crocheting the hexagon stitch. To demonstrate the stitch, I'm using a medium weight yarn and a 5mm crochet hook. I also have a few stitch markers on hand. Yarn selection is important with this stitch, and I've written a little bit more about that in the description below. We will start off with a beginning chain that is a multiple of 8 plus 4, and then we're going to add 2 to that. This will complete our beginning chain. For the purpose of my little sample swatch, I am chaining 30. This is the only time I'm going to speed up during this tutorial because this stitch pattern is a little bit more challenging. Here I've got my beginning chain, and I'm going to start off working into these back bumps. For row 1, you'll skip your first 2 chains and you'll work a single crochet in the 3rd stitch from your hook. And you'll also single crochet in each of the next 3 stitches. We're going to take a moment and count back from those 4 stitches and place a stitch marker in that beginning chain 2 space. Now we'll skip the next 3 stitches and work 3 double crochets in the next stitch. Skip 3 more stitches and work a single crochet in the next stitch. This is where row 1 begins its repeating pattern. You're going to skip the next 3 stitches, and then into the next stitch you'll work 3 double crochets, and then we're going to work an extended picot. You're going to chain 6, but you want the first 4 of these chains to be looser than normal. I even like to hold on to the back loop of my 4th chain because I'm going to turn around and work right back into that, and it just makes it so easy to find my stitch. So after you chain 6, you're going to single crochet in the 3rd chain from your hook and in the next 3 stitches. I'm going to pause here and place a stitch marker in the chain 2 space at the top of this picot. Then you'll work 3 double crochets back in that same stitch. So all of this happens in that same stitch. 3 double crochet, a picot, and 3 more double crochet. Then you'll skip 3 stitches, single crochet in the next stitch, and then you'll go back to the beginning of this repeat. You'll skip 3 stitches and then work the 3 double crochet, the picot. Here you can see that I'm really extending these chains and holding on to that 4th one, so I can come right back and work a single crochet into this stitch and then into the back bumps of the next 3 chains. And then once I have those 4 single crochets complete, I'll take a second and mark that chain 2 space at the top of the picot, and then I'll finish off by working 3 more double crochets back in that same stitch. You'll follow this repeating pattern all the way across, and you'll end by skipping the last 3 chains and single crochet into the last stitch. I'm going to go ahead and mark row 1 with this little pink stitch marker, and you can see that row 1 starts up really on the side of my swatch. And if you're wondering why this is called a hexagon stitch, here you can see the 4 sides, 1, 2, 3, 4 of our hexagon beginning to form. Okay, are you ready? Let's move on to row 2. Row 2 begins with a chain 3. This will count as our first double crochet. And now we're going to work a cluster. Let me talk you through this. We're going to work this cluster over the next 8 stitches. So that's the last stitch we made, the 3 double crochets, and all 4 stitches going up this side of the picot. To work the cluster, you're going to yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then you're going to do it again in each stitch of the cluster. So 8 times you're going to be working a yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop. You want to keep these loops nice and loose. When you're done, you should have a total of 17 loops on your hook. And then you'll yarn over and pull through all 17 loops on your hook. It's perfectly fine to do this a few stitches at a time. Also make sure that your hook is really facing your work so that it's not grabbing on to any of the loops. You'll see that I'm turning my hook all the way to the left and carefully pulling it through these loops. Once you get through all of the loops, you can feel that it's really pulling on the work, and you don't want these loops to be too tight. These loops are going to be forming the rings in our fabric. So while you don't want them to be oversized, you also don't want them to be too tight and cinch the fabric. Once you're happy with the formation of your ring, chain 1 to close that ring, and then you're going to chain 3 and you're going to single crochet in the top of the next picot. If we take just a minute to look at that first cluster, you can see it's starting to form the beginning of a ring on the side of our swatch. Okay, let's get back to work. This is where the repeating pattern starts for this row. We're going to chain 3. And now, believe it or not, we're going to work one of those clusters, but this time we're going to do it over 15 stitches. So it's going to be these 4 stitches from our picot, then the 3 double crochet, the single crochet, these 3 double crochet, and then these 4 stitches up the next picot. Whenever I'm in doubt as to where my first stitch on my picot is, I always double check by counting back from the 3 double crochet. They're just easy and distinctive. And now it's time to yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop for the next 15 stitches. This is really going to start to crowd your hook. You just need to let them slide down the hook without sliding off the other end. You're going to have a total of 31 loops on your hook. And yes, we're going to yarn over and pull through all 31 of these loops. Just take your time, do it a few stitches at a time. Really make sure you're turning your hook so that it's not grabbing any of these loops but sliding right underneath. As you get to the end, the work will feel a little bit tighter. And that's why when we're done with this, we're going to pull on the working yarn so that we can loosen up these loops just a little bit. Remember, these form our ring, and we really want to control the size of our ring, and we want the size of our rings to be consistent. So you really want to get a feel for how you want these loops to look and how loose you want them to be so that you can recreate that each time you're working one of these clusters. With that, we'll chain 3, work a single crochet into the top of the next picot, and then we'll repeat this process all over again. If we take just a moment, here we can see our very first full ring starting to take shape. We'll be finishing this off in the next row. I'm also going to take a moment and mark the beginning of this row. And now we'll carry on. So we just worked that last single crochet. We're going to chain 3 and work our next cluster over 15 stitches. While this does feel like a lot of yarn to manage, the worst thing that can happen is that you slip up and then you just easily pull them out and start again. One of the great things about crochet is it's super easy to rip out a little bit and go back to a starting place and try again. And here you'll see I'm taking the time to really be happy with the size of the ring. Once you start getting a few rows in, you really get into a rhythm with this and you get a sense of the tension that you want going through these loops. You'll chain 1 to close your cluster and then chain 3, and then you'll single crochet in the top of the last picot. You've now conquered the 2 elements in the hexagon stitch, these large clusters, and then also the 3 double crochet picot 3 double crochet stitches. I hope you're feeling good as we head into row 3. Chain 1 and turn. You'll work a single crochet in the first stitch, and then you're going to skip that chain 3 and you're going to be working into the ring. You'll work 3 double crochets, your picot, and then 3 double crochets again, all into this first ring. I literally have all the construction in the world happening on my street today. I'm so sorry for any background noise. Now that you've worked a few of those clusters, I'm sure you can understand why I recommend that we make these chains loose, because you're literally working into these stitches on both sides of the picot, and it's just so much nicer to be able to easily slip your hook into these single crochets. And now I'm finishing this up with those second 3 double crochets into the ring. And I'm going to continue to mark the top of my picots. You might not feel like this is necessary, and it's perfectly fine if you want to skip this step. Here we have our very first completed ring, and you can see that it was created from all 6 sides. I'm going to mark the beginning of row 3 before I carry on. We just finished our 3 double crochet picot 3 double crochet into the ring, and now we're going to skip the next chain 3 and work a single crochet into the next single crochet. Here we are at the beginning of our repeat. You skip that chain 3 and then you're working the 3 double crochet picot, 3 double crochet into the next ring. Here we are working our picot with these nice loose chains. Then back down the other side. It's not so much that it's hard to work into the single crochets, it's more of a challenge to work into those chains unless you make them nice and roomy. With that picot marked, we're going to skip the next chain 3, work a single crochet into the single crochet. And now we're coming to the end of the row, but we have one more partial ring here. We're going to skip that chain 3 and we're going to work 4 double crochets into this last ring. Row 4 begins with a chain 6. This chain 6 counts as a double crochet and a chain 3. This one's a little bit different, so we're going to begin in the 4th chain from the hook with our cluster over the next 15 stitches. So you're going to skip the first 3 chains, then yarn over, work your hook into the 4th chain from your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, and do that for the next 2 chains. These are the first 3 in our cluster of 15, and now you're going across these 4 double crochets, and now you're working into the single and then into the next 3 double crochets, and then we'll finish off going up the 4 double crochets on the side of the picot. This will give us our 15 stitches, and now we can yarn over and pull through all of the loops on our hook. I am sure you are starting to cotton on to this pattern, so I'm going to pipe down till we get to the end of the row where the pattern changes just a little bit. With that single crochet chain 3, we've reached our last cluster, but there are not 15 stitches to be had, so we'll be working our last cluster over 8 stitches here. You'll go into the 4 single crochets down the side of the picot, the 3 double crochets, and the last one will be the single crochet. So here we are, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and now we're in the double crochet, 5, 6, 7, and our last one goes in the single crochet, 8, and now we can yarn over, pull through these loops, and when you close this cluster, row 4 will be complete. Here we are on row 5, which is the last row in this stitch pattern. We begin row 5 by chaining 9. This counts as a double crochet and a picot. So just like we formed the rest of the picots, we're going to skip the first 2 stitches, single crochet in the 3rd stitch from the hook, and in each of the next 3 stitches. You can mark the top of this picot if you so choose. Now you're going to skip those remaining 3 chains and work 3 double crochets in your first ring. You'll skip the next chain 3 and then work a single crochet in the single crochet, and then you'll skip the next chain 3 and you're going to work 3 double crochets, a picot, and 3 more double crochets into the next ring. I'm going to stop and mark my picot, and then we can carry on. So we basically have half a stitch at the beginning of the row, which I'll mark with a stitch marker. And now we're going to skip the next chain 3, single crochet in the next single crochet, and start our repeating pattern all over again. When you reach the end, you'll skip 3 chains and work your last single crochet in the top of the next chain. So if we look at our little swatch, I almost want to laugh because it's so small that it looks rather wonky, but we can use it to get an idea of our pattern. So to continue on with this stitch, you'll repeat rows 2 through 5 respectively. You'll see that the rings aren't stacked, but they're offset from each other. Okay, so I disappeared and I found another skein of yarn that I thought might work up nice, and I have a much larger swatch for us to look at. The pink stitch marker marks row 1, and I'm kind of dragging my finger across the rows so you can follow along. I also finished the top with a little simple scallop. I'll include how I did that in the description below. I think one of the things I love about this fabric is, for me, it's really giving that decorative fabric from India that has the little round mirrors. This has given me a project idea that I can't wait to explore. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please hit like and subscribe. I post every Tuesday, and come back next Tuesday so you can see how my project works out. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.